Welcome back to Read Poems Every Day. In this video, we're going to wrap up my notes about Philip Larkin's 1914, there it is, which I started in a previous video, beginning with the insertion of a word that was missing in the previous video. As you can see, I've already pre-filled in my notes here, partly because I didn't necessarily want this video to carry on in the same way the first one did. As I'm still kind of getting used to how I want this thing to run, I thought maybe it best just to walk you through it as opposed to splitting my attention between typing out the notes and thinking through them with you. So the step that follows my note-taking on sound and sense looks at form and figures. If you're curious about form, what I mean by form, I have a 4-minute video on my channel, which you're welcome to go watch. Pause this one, go watch that one, come back to this one. You'll see that by it, I mean a whole range of things pertaining to the shape and arrangement of a poem, including, if it's relevant, the kind of subgenre or genre of poem that it is. This is a good time when I'm sort of thinking about this poem's form to remind myself that it's one sentence long. The poem expands, takes advantage of the way syntactic structures can stretch or be articulated across lines and stanzas. So this poem sort of stretches that. I wouldn't say to an extreme, but certainly shows what a sentence can do. The poem, in terms of its style, its point of view, its angle, is observational, visually rich, but not ornate. Highly organized yet informal, conversational, um, and really what dominates its function, or the mode it engages in, is its use of the list. Things are set side by side, and if you think just of the relationship of stanza 1, 2, and 3, you can see how Larkin does this. Stanza 1, as I went over in my previous video, observing this phenomenon of men queuing up to volunteer for the war effort. The shift in stanza 2 to thinking about the background of commerce, of children at play, of advertisements. And then stanza 3, shifting to the countryside and thinking about those who are at a spatial remove from whatever is going on here and who may be benefiting in certain ways from that activity abroad. So we get a sense of these things set side by side. I do mention there's a sort of hint of parataxis here, but usually with parataxis, a sort of rhetorical figure where things are set side by side, uh, and but that the connections between those things are kind of obscured or taken out, so it's left up to you to think about um, what relationship there is among those things. Anyway, sorry, that was a bumbling way to describe what parataxis is. That's kind of what's going on here, and yet Larkin is pretty clear that the speaker is making judgments and evaluations of what he's looking at, and yet all the same things are kind of set side by side. The speaker is characterized through diction, through word choice, patterns of attention and judgment. One of the ways in which the speaker does that, a little bit of characterization comes through, is in the as if comparisons that are in stanza 1. The long lines, people queuing up patiently as if stretched outside these venues, as if everyone's on holiday. And so this is the comparison that sets the scene of the poem, so to speak. We have the association with children at play with royalty, something that often happens with children at play, that they sort of role play positions of authority or subservience. Uh, the poem, when it comes to figurative language, is actually quite descriptive and literal rather than figurative. So we have those initial comparisons, but for the most part, it's not comparing things and not comparing things. We do, I guess, have a kind of metonymy Larkin is describing people here, but he doesn't call them people. He calls them lines. And so we have lines, we have faces, we have hats, but there's no direct reference to people queued up in these lines or the people to whom these faces belong. And so there's a sense in which, even with the some evidence of comparison and substitution, there's a sense that the situation can be kind of literally described because it is already exaggerated, ridiculous, outrageous, even heartbreaking. And so no big heroic metaphor is needed in order to paint this picture or to express what the poem wants to express. Moving on then to the ideas and questions I've developed about this poem. It's worth noting that the poem itself asks no questions, has no questions, but it does seem to want to create a kind of lens through which to understand the scale of something that's been lost. I'm also compelled by the poem's double dip into the past. Of course, its dip into 1914 being the primary one, but there's also a dip into the medieval period with a reference to the Doomsday Book, which was a survey of property and resources that was commissioned by, I think, William the Conqueror in 1064. I don't know, something like that, AD. I'm not a historian. I had to look up these details earlier today, and the details matter. But what I'm trying to say, and with what I'm trying to say, is just simply that Larkin looks into the past by about, looking back 5 decades, but then when he turns to the countryside, a kind of even deeper past of authority and war and property and aristocracy seems to impose itself on his imagination. And while he doesn't explicitly say this, there's a sense in which the enlisted, those volunteering, enlisted's probably the wrong word, but those volunteering for the war effort seem to be then framed as property. That behind this veneer of commerce and children at play and advertisements and the smiling people on holiday, supposedly, or maybe that's how it looks or feels, there is a kind of system worth critiquing and exposing. Maybe that's reading too far into the poem, but I'm not the one who mentioned doomsday here, or the one who double dips into the past or dips only to dip further before coming back closer to the present. Um, there's an implicit contrast too between then the speaker's world, which is not described in the past. All we know about the speaker's world is that we are past or after innocence. Um, and then I'm not sure why I left this to last. Maybe I was just looking back at the poem and thinking, oh, I need to say something about the use of Roman numerals in the title here, which gives a sense of gravity, seriousness, um, even a sense of elegy to the subject matter, but it also locates the reader. I mentioned very early in my comments about the poem and note taking about the poem how important the title is for clarifying the potential contents, the situation being described. Without the title, I think it'd be a little harder to understand exactly what the speaker is seeing when describing. Some possible contexts for future study of the poem. I doubt I'm going to write up an article or a close reading of the poem. But as I said in past videos, it's important for me to sketch out possible contexts, if only to sort of remind myself of what I don't know, and also to bring to mind what would be available to know should I want to go there, right, and come back to it again. So I'd like to know a little bit more about poets in the mid-century who draw on World War I, World War II imagery. I'm also thinking of Amanda Golden's study of mid-century poets' views of modernism. So these poets in the middle of the century are looking back to the early decades of the modernist period, and in many cases probably knew many of the modernist poets. I'm thinking of Mark Hussey's reference to the poem in his Mrs. Dalloway book, which is sort of what launched my turn to this poem this morning. And of course, I'm an academic, so of course I'm going to be curious about Larkin's biography and other scholarship in Larkin's studies. Um, And what about, 20th century discourses of the Doomsday Book? I'm curious where else that shows up, not just in literature, but maybe in other references in the popular and public imagination. And then lastly, I'm curious what media would have been available to Larkin about World War One. When would he have come across photos? Was he reading histories? Were there contemporary news stories that might have sparked his imagination? Was he reading World War One literature? Was he familiar with the war poets? I imagine he was. I imagine he was. So if you're watching this thinking, of course he was, you know more than I do about it. Anyway, so those would be context. That's where I would start. I'd start reading around before then resituating myself, re-anchoring myself in my notes and thinking about what I notice, what stands out, and what, if any, argument I might make for some sort of audience, some sort of interested audience. All right, before we wrap up, let's read the poem one more time. You'll remember step one was reading aloud. Step two was bean counting. 3, listening for sound and sense. 4, describing form and figures. 5, shaping ideas and questions. 6, sketching possible contexts. There is a step 7, though, which is looking again. And sometimes looking again is just that, just looking again. There are no notes involved, but you never know what might stand out again. I'm going to reread the poem, let us sit in silence for a bit, and then we'll call it a day. 1914. Those long, uneven lines, standing as patiently as if they were stretched outside the Oval or Villa Park. The crowns of hats, the sun on mustached, archaic faces, grinning as if it were all an August bank holiday lark. In the shut shops, the bleached established names on the sunblinds, the farthings and sovereigns and dark-clothed children at play, called after kings and queens, the tin advertisements for cocoa and twist, and the pubs wide open all day. In the countryside not caring, the place names all hazed over with flowering grasses and fields shadowing doomsday lines under wheat's restless silence, the differently dressed servants with tiny rooms in huge houses, the dust behind limousines. Never such innocence, never before or since, as changed itself to past without a word. The men leaving the gardens tidy, the thousands of marriages lasting a little while longer. Never such innocence again. 1914, Philip Larkin. Thanks for listening. Let's read more poems tomorrow.